So my artistic identity, I think, has changed quite a bit. Or let's say when I was 20 years old, I had no idea who I wanted to be as a classical artist representing music from the past to an audience that lives in the 21st century. But I think what is the most important to me is to stay curious, to stay open-minded, and to always find ways to seek the connection to the audience. That's very important for me. I grew up going to concerts where the artists were on stage so far away, and you could always feel this distance, and they looked like people above the clouds. And I mean, in a way, I admired it a lot, but on the other hand, I always wanted to find out, how does it sound when this person speaks? What are they thinking while they're playing and performing this great music? And I think that has slowly changed. And I think people seek for intimacy, and they want to be able to relate to artists. So for me, that is always one of the most important aspects. When I know what I want to do, I'm constantly thinking about, okay, why I'm doing this, and how do I then translate this to an audience. Being raised in Munich, in Germany, we had, when I was growing up, a wonderful classical music scene, and I went to countless concerts. I think Martha Argerich was always a very special role model for me. But I take inspiration from artists from different genres. Whenever I go to a concert, I get inspired most of the time, and you know, when something is very moving and authentic, then it is something that motivates me. And when I go back home, my brain is very fuzzy, and you know, there are so many ideas, and that is not limited to a genre for me at all. So I love Nina Simone. When I was 15, 16, I discovered Pink Floyd. I love their visual storytelling also. High Hopes is one of my favorite music videos ever. So I get my inspiration from different artists. I had the immense pleasure to record the music by Jóhann Jóhannsson. That many of those pieces that were originally written for different instrumentation and partly also larger ensembles were now reimagined for solo piano. We've recorded these pieces rewritten for solo piano in Iceland, and Iceland for me is a very special and meaningful place because 10 years ago I've collaborated with Ólafur Arnalds. We did a project called the Chopin Project, and for me that project was very important because I was in a place of search. When I was searching for my artistic identity, coming from a very traditional background and facing challenges in the music industry, myself not knowing how to belong and how to be. So collaborating with Ólafur helped me accepting new possibilities to which I was being very hesitant before because of my education. Now coming back to Iceland with the music by Jóhann Jóhannsson was coming back to all these memories on the one hand, and on the other hand it was music that I had discovered a few years before probably the first time while listening to or while watching either The Arrival or The Theory of Everything, and I really loved the musical language that was giving so much more elevation to the visual images. And so I got interested in Jóhann's music, and I started listening to his music whenever I wanted to feel calm. And being there in Iceland, in this recording studio, I had the choice between two instruments, an upright piano and a grand piano. And in the end, we ended up recording most of the pieces on the upright piano because it had a very nostalgic and intimate sound. And that's what his music is about. I think it has a very unique kind of intimacy and also urgency. And I think it carries something that people seek for in this very crowded, troubled, and dissonant world that we live in today. Well, first of all, I stopped thinking in genres and drawers. I think music goes kind of beyond that. Thinking in drawers leads to a term that I don't like very much, that is crossover. I personally differ between music that touches me and music that doesn't. And when you listen to music, when you first encounter music, a piece or a song you hear for the first time, you don't think, oh, what genre is that? You kind of inhabit and just take in what you listen, and either you like it or not. When you like it, then you want to hear it more often, and you get interested maybe in the composer, in the artist, in the background. But it starts somewhere else, and it's a very instinctive thing. And I think also the approach and how we perform music is something that has to do with instinct. Of course, when you, through education and also through experience of being a performer and being a musician, you add tools to your palette. And of course, for me, it's always important to also analyze structure and understand context and proportions and stuff like that. But it doesn't start there. It starts with this feeling of, oh, I like this. Oh, what is this? And I think it's for everyone the same, and it's still for me the first impression I get when I listen to music that I feel drawn to. So, you know, I start thinking about emotions. That's my starting point. And for me, with Jóhann Jóhannsson's music was very much also this approach. What do I feel? What do I think he wants to portray in this music? And then how can I find the best way to then translate that through the instrument? Well, the intimacy is there because as soon as you start listening to his music, you feel it's close. There is some familiarity in it, and it almost feels as his music is really directly speaking to you. And I'm also very happy of how we have captured the sound, because the microphones were put very close to the strings and to the hammers. So I think as a listener, you have the feeling that you sit right next to the music making. And the urgency there is that it really forces you to stop and to kind of merge into the music and be aware of the moment. And I think that is what people seek for when they put on their headphones in a busy train or while they're taking a walk. They want to escape the busy world. And by doing that, you kind of force yourself to be aware of, give yourself first of all time, and you're conscious of the moment, and it gives you a moment of focus. It is different to portray a piece that is written for different instruments on the piano. And as a pianist, especially, I am never playing on the same instruments. Every day I have a different instrument in front of me. And although, even if I play a program for 2 or 3 years or even longer, every day it's kind of a new approach, because you have to first of all understand the instrument, the characteristics of the instrument, also how you match with it, what is the full scope of capability of the instrument, where are the limits, where do you have to kind of move around, and then how does that blend into the space where you are. That is always very important, and that keeps also the interpretation very fresh. And so I was there in this recording studio, and I had this, it was actually not very difficult, because I had this really wonderful upright piano there, and it felt like I was walking on clouds. It was a very special feeling. And then having Johann's music there, I think the music and this piano was a real match, and so it was not very difficult for me to find the right path, at least in my eyes. In the end, it's always a very personal interpretation. Music is not, it's not a neutral thing. It's always very personal. I was just surprised and also impressed that all these pieces worked so well on one piano. And it is of course a more focused and dense sound world than if you have electronics and other instruments. But it kind of also highlights, I think, hidden nuances and colors that I think are very unique to Johann's musical language. Through this recording process, I got to know people who were close to him, who worked with him, who could share with me stories of how he was as a person, how he was as a composer. And that was very meaningful to me, because I've never met him in person. And in the beginning, I was a bit hesitant, because I thought I might not be the right person to do this recording. But I also remembered what it means to make music, and also what a composer leaves to the afterworld. And their souls, they live on in the pieces. And there are so many people out there in the world who don't know him personally, but feel very close to his music. And that's, I think, the timelessness of their being. It's through the music. And I'm also a big admirer of his music. So I thought, in the end, it doesn't matter if I've met him or not. And anyway, most of the time I'm playing compositions by composers who have passed away 200 years ago. So it didn't matter, but it helped me a lot to be surrounded by people who loved him, who were close to him, and who could give me more context. The visual storytelling is always a very important part. I kind of grew up with a different mindset. because especially in the classical music scene, or it might have changed now, but when I was growing up, it was all about just diving into the music, and anything else was not really welcomed. And if we're talking about marketing or promoting something, that was always seen as something nasty. And I truly believe today that it is such an essential part, because as musicians we want to reach people, and in order to reach people we need to share this in different ways. And when you create an album, for example, then the music, of course, is the core and the most important thing, and I will spend most of my time, of course, with the music. But then I also believe in not only the what, but in the why and the how. And so creating a cohesive visual story around it makes the project just more authentic. And it's also something that I think people perceive as important. And personally, I'm just a very aesthetic person too. So I'm always interested in, okay, how is the cover going to look like? How is the whole artwork going to look like? Sometimes I'm a little bit of a pain in the ass, because I want to get involved in everything. But I work with a great team, and they give me a lot of trust and freedom, and I'm very happy that I get to shape it together with them. And this is something that is very important for me as an artist. So I think it is first of all, we always start at what is written in the score, and that's where the tools that you have learned or you were given by your teachers and throughout your educations are of course very important. How do you read the architecture, the structure, the proportions of the piece? That is one of the most important starting points, of course. And once you get a good understanding of this piece, I mean, it's not once. The thing is, you have all these tools, but in the end, how you read it is still it's a very personal angle. And that's where the interpretations become so different. It's also how we perceive color, how we perceive taste, how we perceive smell. There are fine nuances and differences, even though we're talking about the same thing. So, for example, if there's written a dynamic, let's say a piano or a forte, we perceive it differently, and also, again, depending on which instrument we play, in which space we play, how the sound travels in the space, and again, how the atmosphere from the audience is. It all plays into it, and that changes it, and that's why it will never be the exact same performance. Even in a recording, every take is different. But especially in a live performance, it varies so much from day to day, because you have all these different elements and angles feeding into it. And as an artist, you have to be flexible and agile in the moment and react to that. But of course, there are also things that I read today differently than 10 years ago. And the reason might be because I have more knowledge now, or I see things differently, and I've come to a realization that maybe, this composer meant it in a more radical way than I might have seen it 10 years ago. First of all, I hope everybody finds their own way into this music, their own way of engaging with it. I think that because his music requires so much awareness and focus, or it creates this moment of focus. It will hopefully also remind us how important it is to listen, and not just to yourself, but to people around you. And music is probably one of the very few places where people come together to be united in the art and the act of listening, and listening to themselves, but also to who is with you, who is around you, being aware of each other and creating something together. And I think Johann's music has a very strong voice in that, because it really focuses everything.